In our final segment, we're going to again summarize, but there are some things that we really want to stress that are so important, which are kind of pitfalls that board members can get into, and also maybe some of the joys, some of the fun parts. We haven't talked much about those.
No, we have not.
We're so used to warning everybody about the things that could go wrong that many times there's a sense of a really good feeling serving your community. We haven't talked about that spirit that you get where you have done things that you can see achieved. Maybe it's a building project. Maybe it's a new way of dealing with your tenants or your homeowners, whatever. But you create policies that you get joy out of. You see some positive effects of all these.
I can tell you, over the weekend, I went to a community who was celebrating their 40th anniversary of being an association, and they had just redone their clubhouse. And people were so excited.
Yeah.
They really were. I mean, they were just enthusiastic, and they did a great job. And they acknowledged the people that helped on different committees, and it was really nice to see something positive like that.
Yeah, and we have a lot of those, a lot of social, a lot of fun times. But we're here today. We're talking about your roles, your responsibilities. So we want to stress again some of the things that we really want to caution you in doing it. And one of the things is never act outside the scope of your responsibility.
Never do that.
Don't try to be a community manager. Don't try to be a lawyer. Don't try to be an accountant.
Even if you are an attorney, you cannot represent your association on legal matters. You just can't do it. It's just not the right thing to do. You have an attorney that represents the association, and that's the person that you need to use. So if you are an attorney and you're on a board, don't give your board any legal advice.
Yeah, that's so good. One of the ones that I guess is the strongest, you can be charged with the ombudsman, it brought up to a commission, so forth, if you act out of reasons of self-interest, gain, prejudice, or revenge. These are things that are all areas within that, again, fiduciary responsibility. If you cross the line, these are the ones that are the pitfalls. These are the things that will get you into trouble. Now, revenge, we haven't talked about that. We talked about prejudice. We've talked about, trying to take on more than you're qualified to do. But revenge, there are some times, and I'm going to be honest, I've dealt with this, where you have that homeowner who drives you crazy, who's always attacking you, and sometimes they cross the line where it becomes personal. And they attack you in such a way that you feel like you got to get even, somehow get even with them. And
resist.
Yeah,
say no.
You have to resist. And sometimes
no.
people think because you disagree on a board that you're, angry and you're upset with your fellow board members. That's not at all the case.
No.
You're allowed to disagree, but you can still respect one another. That's important. That when you sit together on the board, you work together, but you respect one another, and you show that at public meetings and so forth. It's really important that we do that. But we also want to say there's a danger about some of the things that you can get into if, in fact, you break a statute, you break a law. These are things that are important. Yeah, you have a comment?
Yeah, you know what? As their community manager, the one thing that's become really apparent lately is that when a board is found to be either gross negligent because they violated a statute or they actually disobeyed or stepped out of their authority within their governing documents and they violate those documents, if they have an insurance claim, and the insurance carrier will provide defense, they'll provide the attorney and the hours that it takes to fight the claim in the lawsuit. The end result is if they find in favor that the board did violate, the end result is they can pull that defense and the insurance company can come after the association for payment of all those legal fees, which in some cases could be upwards of $100,000. That makes the HOA self-insured, so boards need to be aware of that.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up.
That's why you allow the manager to manage, because the managers know these things, and we as volunteer board members may not.
That is so true. And again, I really thank you for bringing that up. That's something we needed to address. Well, some of the other things we were going to talk about here is, the disclosing of confidential information. We talked a little bit about unit owners and giving out information. We didn't really talk too much about if a homeowner receives a violation or a fine, or there's some other condition. I've had an experience where one homeowner physically attacked in the community center another homeowner. These are serious issues. And the hardest part about some of this is people expect you as a board member to tell them everything. You know, full disclosure. Well, these are areas that you don't fully disclose.
You don't.
These are private, and people
private.
deserve their privacy, their confidentiality. That's so important.
It is important, and if the people that live in your community realize that what they come and talk to you about, you're going to keep that private. It's going to help you and them.
Well, we talk about, you know, owners, but also don't forget, we don't want to disclose things about tenants.
No.
You know, one of the things that...
Tenants are members of your community too.
Yeah, and I really think I would advise boards to really somehow incorporate them in your community to make them feel appreciated. Many tenants live there for years and years, and it's important to let them feel. Now, they can't be in a membership meeting, they can't vote, but they certainly can, you know, be involved in almost every aspect.
They still use the pool, and they still use the parks and things like that.
Sure, exactly. Oh, we have another question. Yes, go right ahead.
Hi. What if the board did not consult an expert to do a major construction project, like replace a brick wall? You know, what can happen? When should they consult an outside expert?
Okay. Well, there's two things there that I want to discuss. I think first, there's a very important part of the law that says you must use licensed, insured workers.
Nevada licensed.
Nevada licensed. So if you're going to do any kind of electrical work, plumbing work, building something, carpentry work, you need to hire people that are, in fact, professionals. They have the insurance, they have the licensing and so forth. To avoid any kind of problem whatsoever, that's the only way to go. And it's very important. Now, one of the other things, which was something I just recently learned, that's in the statute, and that is if you're doing a major project, and let's assume you have 3 or more trades involved. Say you have plumbing, electrical, carpentry, masonry work, you could do a whole bunch of different trades involved. You must, by law, have a general contractor in charge of that project. Now that sounds like, oh, more money, that kind of thing. But you know, the most important thing about that, liability. That liability goes right to the general contractor. It is not the HOA's responsibility. How serious can it be? You asked, what can they do? Believe it or not, I know of a fine of $10,000 for someone who, in fact, was managing for the general contractor instead of having somebody that's licensed. So these are areas that, you know, you really got to be careful about. And the key here is in this area, you defer liability. When you have licensed people with their own insurance policies, doing the work professionally, you then defer all of that liability.
Always err on the side of caution.
Oh, absolutely.
Really and truly, it will save you in the long run. It really will. Don't think you know. You don't. You must follow the law.
Yep. Let's get into what board members shall do.
What board members shall do? Oh, dear.
Yeah. We talked about all the negatives and all the nots. Now, you know, things that you should do. Again, some of these we've talked about. Let's just quickly review them so we get them all again.
Well, I think what I will do is I'll read this just to make sure I get it all. Comply with all laws and governing documents. Uniformly enforce the governing documents.
Oh, wait, we didn't talk about that. Uniformly.
Uniformly, yeah.
That's important because you don't make one decision for one homeowner because you like them or they're your neighbor. Nope. You must make decisions for all homeowners uniformly.
Exactly.
Very good. Good point.
And obtain, when practicable, at least 3 bids. That's also important. Consult with the appropriate professionals before making major decisions. Deposit all funds in a financial institution with guaranteed fund insurance, such as FDIC. Maintain current, accurate financial records. Maintain adequate reserves. This is a really important thing. Mm-hmm. Reserves are really, really important because without them, you can't get a lot of the things done that you need to do for your community. And work to build the sense of a community spirit. Yep. And that's really important because the communities that work together are happier communities.
Yes, that's true. I want to go back to one that's really important. We didn't spend much time on the bid process. We talked about, you used that word practicable, which is again one of my favorite words on the
It's a $10 word.
Yeah. It says when you're doing a major constructive project, you really need to have at least 3 bids. That's what they're asking you to do. That's in the law. You're required to open them at a public board meeting in front of the homeowners so they can hear the bids and so forth. And then you consider it and you award the contract. This can be an issue sometimes. Sometimes you have projects where you can't get 3 bids, only 2 bids. I dealt with one recently where we had 5 people take the bids and said they were going to bid on it, and only 2 came back.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, and it's a problem where you have to try to work to get those 3 bids, to try to be able to show the fairness that you are comparing and so forth. These are issues that are still ongoing. As a matter of fact, the legislative session right now is addressing this issue.
Yes, they are.
And, you know, from time to time, even after we give you this class, July, they may be different. So we got to be careful about the rules because those changes in the legislature will affect us immediately. A lot of times they come into effect July 1st.
Sometimes they do.
So by the time you finish learning all this and we taught you all this great stuff, there may be something different. And that's one of the areas that's being looked at right now in the legislature. So we've got to, from year to year to year, we always have to kind of update.
Yes,
what
we do.
changes there are, what are things that are going on.
Because our legislature meets every 2 years, once every 2 years for 120 days. And like what is law today may be different tomorrow. Frank is entirely right.
Okay, well, do we have another question? Yes, go ahead.
Why do we need to have so much money in our reserves?
That's a good one. Reserves is always a good one.
Reserves are always good.
Well, we could talk about, you know, the professional business standard again. I don't know. The most common one I hear is around 70% funded. That's what people say. You can go into other HOAs and they say, unless you have 100% funded, you're not doing your job.
Well, I can tell you a reason why you have to have reserves, and it's important to have them. Down here in the south, there are 2 communities right next to each other. One was a homeowners association with adequate reserves. The other was part of the city that they were part of. And the fences were getting worn, water and in disrepair. The homeowners association, their fences look great. They're the same age, both communities the same age. The ones that weren't in an association, that were just part of the city didn't have the reserves to maintain those walls. So what happened is the HOA looked great, the city walls looked in disrepair, and who do you think the property values are going to hold up? Which one do you think is going to be more advantageous to live and the property values to hold up? The one in the HOA. So it's really important to make sure that you have your reserve study done. You have to have it every 5 years. We always have an update halfway through that cycle just to make sure that we are adequately funded and make sure that you have your reserve specialist on speed dial.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that every board, and your board is the same, you're going to end up making a policy of what you think is what you need to do for your reserves. It is greatly debated as to what percentage they should be, what dollar figures, but you really need to pay attention again here to the professional. None of us are really the expert, you know, and again, one of the things I want to give a little plug here. The CAI has great classes on reserves. And they really do a good job of explaining it, how you determine it. But it comes down to your own local HOA. You know, what are you comfortable with? What percentage of funding is in reserves? All I can say to you in general, the more money you have in reserves, the more secure everybody feels.
If you need to refloor your streets, you have that money in reserves, you're adequately funded, you don't have to float a special assessment to the homeowners, which you never want to do.
No. Well, I want to thank you as board members that showed so much interest today. You had great questions, by the way. And one of the things that are important for us to point out is that education, again, we're part of a team that's educating. We're the media presentation arm of CAI. And we have made a number of videotapes with our colleagues that are also decals. And we hope that maybe you'll look online and hit that little button on the CAI that says video things. We have a number of topics that we are presenting to you that you may take advantage of. These things are really important. The more you get educated, I can guarantee you, the better you're going to feel being a board member that knows what you're doing. So thank you again for inviting us. We really appreciate being here.